the quiet man with the guitar. The soft rumble of voices filled the grand hall of the prestigious Whitehurst Academy. Students dressed in expensive uniforms leaned back in leather chairs, their laughter echoing against the oak-paneled walls. It was a special day, the Academy's annual showcase where students were encouraged to show off their talents. But this year, the event wasn't just about performance. It had taken a different tone, a darker one. For one student in particular, it was about humiliation. Keanu Reeves sat in the back row, dressed in clothes far simpler than those around him. His shirt was slightly faded, his jeans were patched at the knees, and his shoes had clearly seen better days. Most didn't know his full story, just that he was a scholarship student, someone who didn't belong among the sons and daughters of politicians, billionaires, and movie stars. The whispers followed him everywhere. They mocked his silence, his simplicity, his strange habit of carrying an old guitar case, scuffed and worn. "Look at him," someone sneered. "I bet that guitar doesn't even work. Probably found it in the trash." Another voice chimed in, dripping with amusement. "Today's the day he proves it. They put his name on the list. He has to play." Keanu had seen his name posted backstage just an hour ago. It wasn't his choice. He hadn't signed up. Someone else had. And he knew exactly who. Hunter Blake, the golden boy of Whitehurst, heir to a media empire and the self-declared king of the Academy. Hunter wasn't just popular, he was feared. With a voice that could charm and a smile that could deceive, he had power no teacher dared question. Keanu had always avoided confrontation. He came to school, did his work, and left quietly. He never raised his voice. He never defended himself when rumors spread. He simply nodded and walked away, and that silence made him the perfect target. Now, as the lights dimmed and the host welcomed the audience, Keanu's heart thudded in his chest. His name was called last. "Next up," the announcer said with a sarcastic smile, "we have Keanu Reeves with a guitar solo." A wave of laughter rolled across the hall. Some even clapped mockingly. Hunter leaned back in his seat, his phone already recording. "This is gonna be gold," he whispered to the girl beside him. Keanu walked to the stage slowly. Every step felt heavy. He could feel their eyes, their doubt, their amusement. He reached center stage and set down the battered guitar case. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a guitar that had seen decades. Its wood was cracked, in places its strings mismatched. But to Keanu it was home. It had once belonged to his father, a musician who used to play on street corners and subway platforms before fate took him too soon. Taking a deep breath, Keanu adjusted the strap and stepped up to the mic. The room was a mix of whispers, giggles, and camera flashes. For a moment he froze. He remembered the last time he had performed, in a park years ago for his dying mother. It had been her final smile. The moment passed. His fingers touched the strings. The first note rang out, gentle but steady. Then came the second, then the third. The laughter slowly died. There was something in the way he played, something raw, something honest. His hands moved not with precision but with passion. Each chord told a story. Each note reached for something unseen. The hall fell into silence. People leaned forward, eyes wide. No one expected this. His melody carried sorrow, hope, love, and loss. It wasn't just music, it was emotion given form. His head stayed low, eyes closed as if he wasn't playing for them at all but for someone far away. His world was different, untouched by cruelty or pride. Hunter's smile faded. The recording on his phone now felt like a mistake. When the final note faded, Keanu opened his eyes. There was no applause yet, just stunned silence. Then slowly one person stood and clapped, another followed, and then another. Within seconds, the entire hall was on its feet, clapping louder than they ever had that night. It wasn't out of politeness. It was out of something deeper, respect. Keanu nodded once, then walked off stage quietly. Backstage, a teacher with tears in her eyes tried to speak, but Keanu just gave her a small smile. He didn't need words. But as he walked past the dressing rooms, he overheard a voice. Hunter's voice, cold and sharp. "This isn't over. He just embarrassed me in front of the whole school. I don't care what it takes, I'm gonna destroy him." Keanu paused but kept walking. The performance had changed something, but the storm was only beginning. The echo of strings and the storm behind smiles. The following morning, the air around Whitehurst Academy was different. The chatter in the hallways no longer centered around fashion brands or weekend yacht parties. It circled around the boy with the guitar. Even the seniors, known for ignoring everything beneath them, were murmuring about the performance. A few teachers tried to maintain normalcy, but they too had felt something shift. The music had left an invisible mark, one that stirred something deeper in even the coldest hearts. But while many were moved, one heart had hardened. Hunter Blake sat in the student lounge, his jaw clenched, watching the video of Keanu's performance on his phone. The views were climbing, fast. Someone had posted it under the title, "The Silent Boy Who Made the Whole Room Cry." Comments poured in, praising Keanu's soul, his skill, and his courage. Some even questioned why a talent like him had been hidden so long. Hunter's pride burned. The applause had not been for him, and in his world that was unacceptable. His fingers moved swiftly as he made a call. The voice that answered on the other end was low and formal. "Mr. Blake?" "Dig into him," Hunter said coldly. "I want to know everything about Keanu Reeves. Where he lives, who he talks to, where he comes from. I don't want stories. I want dirt. Something that'll remind people why he doesn't belong here." There was a brief pause. "That could take time." "I'm not asking," Hunter snapped, "and money's not a problem." Across campus, Keanu walked through the quiet garden behind the library. This had always been his safe place. The benches were chipped, the plants overgrown, but it was peaceful. He didn't carry the guitar today. He didn't need to. The memory of the night before was still alive inside him. But part of him knew the silence wouldn't last. He stopped near the stone path and sat under an old tree. From his pocket, he took out a folded paper, a letter from his mother, written before she passed. Her handwriting was shaky, but her words were strong. "No matter how the world tries to bend you, hold on to what makes you kind. Your gift is not just music, Keanu. It's the way you see others. Never let their cruelty change that." His thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice. "That was beautiful last night." Keanu looked up. A girl stood nearby, holding a sketchbook against her chest. She had a quiet presence, almost like she didn't want to take up space. Her name was Elena Hartley, daughter of a powerful senator, but unlike the others, she walked gently through life. People often overlooked her, the same way they overlooked Keanu. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I drew this while you played," she added, flipping open her sketchbook. On the page was a rough but heartfelt drawing of him on stage, surrounded not by people but by waves of sound and emotion. Keanu smiled. It wasn't just the drawing, it was the fact that she saw him, truly saw him. But peace, as always, was brief. By afternoon, flyers had been plastered around school. They showed a grainy photo of Keanu outside a downtown shelter, playing guitar with a cup in front of him. Bold letters screamed, "Whitehurst's street performer, exposed." Laughter returned to the hallways. Some students filmed themselves, reading the flyer dramatically, mocking his past. Others whispered that he had lied about who he was. Even teachers looked away when he passed by. In the lounge, Hunter watched the chaos unfold with smug satisfaction. "Humiliate a Blake in public, and this is what you get," he muttered. Elena found Keanu near the gym lockers later that day. She was angry, more than she'd ever been. "You played to feed yourself and your mother. That isn't shameful. That's strength." Keanu stayed silent. Not because he was afraid, but because part of him knew this wasn't just about school anymore. This was about power, about pride, and about people who had never faced pain trying to break someone who had learned to carry it quietly. But what none of them knew, not even Elena, was that Keanu had been keeping a secret. A secret tied to that guitar, to the man who had owned it before him, and to the melody he hadn't played yet, the one his father warned would change everything. As night fell, Keanu stood on the rooftop of the dormitory, looking over the lights of the academy. He held the guitar once more, tuning its strings slowly, listening to each note as if it were whispering a memory. Far below, the laughter and cruelty continued, but up here, it was just him and the stars, and tomorrow, he would play again. Not because they told him to, but because this time they needed to hear something they would never forget. The melody no one dared to har the next morning. The air at Whitehurst was sharp with rumors, sharp like glass beneath bare feet. Everywhere Keanu walked, eyes followed him, not with admiration this time, but with the smug thrill of judgment. The flyers had done their damage. To most, he wasn't the boy who played music that made grown men cry anymore. He was just a charity case with calloused hands and a beggar's past. In a place obsessed with image, that was enough to burn a person alive. But Keanu didn't flinch. He moved quietly, same as always. His shoulders straight, his pace calm. When someone shoved his books to the ground in the hallway, he knelt, picked them up and didn't look back. When someone mimicked guitar strums and fake sobs behind him, he simply opened the door for them without a word. Not out of fear, but because he had already seen what pain looked like when it wasn't just cruel, but permanent. And this wasn't pain. This was noise. Meanwhile, Elena watched from the edge of her social circle, her fists clenched with frustration. She had tried to speak up, to defend Keanu, but every time, she was silenced. "He fooled us all," her friend said. He used that performance to play the sympathy card. But what they didn't know, what none of them understood, was that Keanu had never asked for their sympathy. He only ever asked for space, to be himself. In the faculty room, a few teachers spoke, in hushed tones. "Did you hear the full story?" one of them whispered. "He used to perform on the street not for fun but to survive. His mother was sick. The music paid for her hospital visits. And the guitar, it belonged to his father, who used to be one of the most respected jazz musicians in the city before he disappeared." "Disappeared?" another asked. "Yes." The first one nodded. "Some say he was blacklisted, framed for something he didn't do. After that, his name vanished from the scene." By late afternoon, a quiet storm had begun to gather. Keanu sat under the old tree behind the library again, guitar across his lap. This time his fingers didn't move randomly. He played scales slow and careful, like a craftsman sharpening an ancient blade. Each note was more precise, more haunting than the last. Elena sat beside him without speaking. She just listened. After a while she asked softly, "What is it you're preparing?" Keanu's fingers paused. He looked ahead, eyes focused far beyond the trees. "My father wrote one piece before he disappeared. He called it The Truth in Silence. He said it was too dangerous to play unless the world stopped listening to words and started listening to pain. And you're going to play it?" He nodded once. "Tomorrow, for the whole academy." News traveled fast. By the next morning, a new flyer appeared across campus. But this one was different. No insults, no mockery, just a black page with white writing, live performance, music that was never meant to be heard. 7 p.m. courtyard stage, Keanu Reeves. The moment it hit the bulletin boards, it stirred something even Hunter couldn't control. Students whispered about it like it was a forbidden spell. Even those who had laughed before were curious. What kind of song needed a warning? What kind of truth could shake the foundations of a school built on image and control? Hunter, watching this unfold, felt the pressure rise inside his chest. He tried to spin it again. "Don't go," he told his followers. "It's just another trick." He's trying to milk the sympathy again. But curiosity is louder than fear. By evening, the courtyard was full. Not just students, but teachers, administrators, even alumni who had seen the viral clip online had returned, sitting quietly in folding chairs, wondering what kind of melody could stir this kind of movement. And then, Keanu walked out. He wore the same faded clothes, carried the same old guitar. But there was something different now. A quiet power in the way he stood. a stillness that demanded attention without raising a single word. He sat. He closed his eyes. And then, he played. The first note didn't just echo, it struck, deep and aching like the sound of a door closing forever. The strings wept softly and then grew bolder, as if telling a story long buried. The melody wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It was honest, achingly honest. The rhythm shifted between sorrow and defiance. Moments of pain rose like waves, then melted into peace before swelling again. It was a conversation between a father and a son, between dignity and humiliation, between the world's cruelty and one boy's refusal to let it define him. As the final notes rang out, something remarkable happened. A tear rolled down the cheek of Headmaster Briarstone, a man known for never showing emotion. Teachers sat frozen, hands clasped. Students who once laughed now sat still, eyes red, breath caught in their throats. And Elena, who stood off stage with her sketchbook clutched to her chest, knew something had shifted in them all, not out of guilt, not out of pity, but out of recognition. Because for the first time they had truly listened, and in the very back, hidden in the shadows, a man watched with trembling hands. He wore a ragged coat and a tattered hat. And as Keanu finished, that man whispered, "He played it. He really played it." His name was Thomas Reeves. The man in the shadow and the silence that followed. That night, long after the last note had faded into the sky and the crowd had silently dispersed, Keanu sat alone on the courtyard stage. The folding chairs were empty now. The lights had dimmed, the night breeze sweeping away the last of the echoes. His guitar lay beside him, silent again, its strings still warm from the truth they had carried. He thought he was alone. But just beyond the hedge, someone had stayed. A low, raspy voice broke the quiet. "I never thought I'd hear that melody again." Keanu turned slowly. There, under the arch of moonlight, stood the man in the ragged coat. His hair was silvered with age and his eyes, though sunken, burned with something familiar. He stepped forward, his shoes worn to the soles, and his hands trembling not from cold, but memory. "Who are you?" Keanu asked, though his heart already knew. "I'm your father," the man said, voice cracking. "My name is Thomas Reeves." The words hit like thunder. Keanu didn't speak. Not yet. He stood up, unsure if he was dreaming, if the man before him was real or just a figment brought to life by emotion. For years he believed his father had died. His mother never said it directly, but she spoke of him like someone buried, someone who'd been taken by something darker than death. Betrayal. "They said you left," Keanu whispered, the words dry in his throat. Thomas stepped closer, his eyes reflecting pain so deep it seemed carved into his skin. "I didn't. I was forced to disappear. Framed by people I trusted, people who wanted me silenced." He sat slowly on the edge of the stage, placing a worn-out notebook on his lap. "Back then, I was working with a music foundation, a nonprofit. We uncovered that Whitehurst and its board members were laundering money through fake scholarship funds. I found the evidence, thought I could expose them. But they got to me first. They spun lies, planted drugs in my apartment, destroyed my reputation. No one would touch me after that. Not even the street corners wanted my music." Keanu sat beside him, stunned. His hands gripped the edge of the stage, knuckles white. "I was going to go public," Thomas said, "but they threatened your mother, said they'd take you away if I didn't vanish. So I did. I became no one." Keanu's eyes filled with tears, not just for the man beside him, but for the years stolen by silence and sacrifice. "And the song?" he asked. Thomas nodded. "I wrote it the day I left. It carried everything I couldn't say. My anger, my guilt, my love for you. I prayed someday you'd find it and know the truth." The next day, whispers of the mysterious man spread across the academy. Some said he was a vagabond. Others claimed he was a former student. But Elena had seen enough of the encounter from the window to understand. Keanu had found someone he thought was gone forever. The performance had also shaken the school in another way. Headmaster Briarstone had received an anonymous package. Inside were scanned copies of old documents, bank statements, financial audits, and a ledger with hand-scribbled annotations, all pointing toward the very corruption Thomas had spoken of. Taped to the final page was a note that read, "Buried truth never stays buried, especially not in silence." By noon, an emergency board meeting was called. Whispers flew faster than text messages. Hunter watched the unfolding chaos from the student lounge, his face pale. His father, one of the biggest donors and the chairman of the board, had been summoned. And worse, investigators were on campus. Elena rushed to find Keanu near the garden. "The song, it wasn't just music, was it?" she asked. Keanu looked at her, his voice calm but resolute. "It was proof, not in words, but in what people feel when they stop pretending." She stepped closer. "They're scared now." He nodded. "Good. They should be." As dusk returned, Whitehurst Academy no longer stood as the untouchable fortress it once was. Shadows had been pulled from beneath golden carpets, and while many still whispered in denial, something irreversible had begun. Students were asking questions. Teachers were digging into their own files. And somewhere behind closed doors, powerful men were preparing to fight back. But Keanu didn't retreat. Instead, he walked straight into the lion's den. That night, he stood at the front of the main auditorium, uninvited. He walked up to the podium during a silent fundraiser dinner, where donors and board members clinked glasses and spoke with smiles that meant nothing. Keanu carried the notebook. The same notebook his father had shown him. He placed it on the podium and said in a voice that rang with quiet fire, "You tried to bury music. You thought silence would protect you, but music carries truth, and now the world is listening." And from the side entrance, Thomas Reeves entered the room, eyes locked with the very men who had erased him. Gasps echoed. Glasses shattered. Phones lit up. The room, for one trembling moment, fell into perfect silence. The silence they feared. Most in less than 24 hours, Whitehurst Academy was no longer just a school. It was the eye of a growing storm. The moment Keanu and Thomas stood together at the podium, the walls that had protected powerful secrets began to shake. Reporters camped outside the school gates. Helicopters hovered overhead. Camera flashes lit up the windows like lightning strikes. And for the first time in decades, the name Reeves was back in headlines, not as a scandal, but as the center of a truth no one could ignore. Keanu didn't return to class that morning. Instead, he stayed by his father's side in the small room the school provided under pressure from the media. It had no comfort, no luxury, just 2 chairs, a table, and the weight of too many lost years between them. They talked about everything, about the jazz clubs Thomas used to play in, about Keanu's first steps and the lullabies he didn't know were his father's. They didn't cry, they didn't hug, they simply sat in the quiet, letting the music of their reunion speak louder than words. Meanwhile, Hunter Blake paced furiously, in the back halls of the academy. His father, Roland Blake, had flown in overnight from New York, his face pale with fury. He was the kind of man whose power moved in silence, whose empire was built not with trust, but with fear, and now, one boy with a guitar had shattered the illusion of control he had spent years building. "This can't go public," Roland hissed, slamming his fist on the headmaster's desk. "If the board collapses, so does every investor tied to Whitehurst. That song, that kid, he's dangerous." Headmaster Briarstone tried to speak, but Roland cut him off. "We need to contain this immediately. No more performances, no more media, no more truth." Outside, a different fight was taking place. Students who had once laughed at Keanu were now standing outside the library, holding signs that read, "Truth deserves a stage." Even teachers were joining them quietly, refusing to take down the posters or stop the murmurs. Change had found its way through the gates, and it was no longer waiting for permission. But danger, when cornered, turns desperate. Late, that evening as Keanu walked back to his dorm room alone, he sensed something wrong. The hallway was too quiet. The lights above flickered faintly. His hand tightened on the guitar case and he moved carefully, steps silent. Then it came. A shove. A crash. The guitar case hit the floor, sliding across the marble. He was dragged into the janitor's supply room, door slamming shut behind him. The darkness closed in. 3 figures stood around him. Not students. Older. Hired. Mr. Blake says you're done playing. One of them growled. Keanu didn't flinch. He looked each of them in the eye. Tell Mr. Blake, he said, voice steady. The song's already been heard. A punch landed across his jaw. Another to the ribs. Pain flared white, but Keanu stayed upright. He'd been hit before. By life, by grief, by hunger. Fists were nothing in comparison. But just as the third blow came, the door burst open. Elena stood there, and behind her, Thomas Reeves holding a steel rod. What followed wasn't a fight. It was truth defending itself. They didn't speak afterward. Thomas helped Keanu to his feet, his hands trembling from the adrenaline, his son leaning on him not out of weakness but trust. Elena picked up the guitar case, her fingers shaking, eyes filled with unshed tears. They returned to the room quietly. But outside, something bigger was unfolding. A leak had reached the press. Someone had published the full notebook online. Every page, every signature, every lie the Academy had used to silence families like Keanu's. The story was everywhere. Whitehurst funds linked to cover-ups, stolen scholarships, and false charges against whistleblowers. The Reeves name wasn't a whisper anymore. It was thunder. Hunter watched the news in horror. Roland Blake's voice screamed from behind closed doors. Calls went unanswered. Investors pulled out. Legal notices began arriving by the hour. And for the first time in his life, Hunter saw his father look afraid. The next day, Whitehurst held an emergency assembly. Keanu walked on stage with bruises on his face and fire in his eyes. Thomas stood beside him. The headmaster, defeated, offered the mic. Keanu didn't play. Not this time, he spoke. Your children are taught to lead, he said, his voice quiet but clear. But not to listen, not to feel, not to question. He paused. Every seat in the auditorium was filled. Cameras streamed live. My father told the truth once, and they buried him. I played a song, and they tried to bury me too. But what they didn't realize is, music doesn't stay buried. It echoes. He looked directly into the lens. This isn't just about me. This is about every voice they tried to silence, every family they erased, every dream they stole. The room held its breath. But we're still here. The applause didn't come immediately. But when it did, it rolled like a wave, a storm of hands and voices rising not in celebration, but in revolution. Outside, the Blake limousine pulled away from the Academy gates for the last time. Inside, Keanu closed the notebook, and somewhere, deep in the heart of every student who heard him that day, something changed. The sound that healed the world outside Whitehurst changed faster than anyone expected. In just 3 days, the Academy that once stood like a monument to pride and wealth was now a symbol of exposure. Reporters no longer lingered at the gates, they camped there day and night. Investigation teams took over the boardrooms. Lawsuits began to bloom like wild vines. One by one, the names that once held power began to vanish from plaques and office doors. Roland Blake resigned in silence, escorted out not with applause but with cameras capturing his fall from grace. And still, through all of it, Keanu Reeves said almost nothing. He returned to his classes. He sat in the same quiet corner of the library. He played his guitar in the garden, not to perform, but simply to feel. The world tried to turn him into a symbol, a headline, a movement. But he had never asked for that. All he wanted was truth, and space to be human. Elena stayed by his side. Every step, every quiet lunch, every late-night walk when the lights around campus felt too heavy. They never defined what they were. They didn't need to. Some connections spoke louder than names. One morning, as the sun rose gold and soft over the eastern field, Keanu found a letter slipped under his door. No name. Just a seal he recognized. an international arts festival held once a year in Florence, Italy. It was the same one his father had been invited to, before he vanished from music. The letter read, "Mr. Reeves, we heard your melody, and we invite you to perform it, uncut, unfiltered, live. The final stage is yours." He read it 3 times, then once more aloud, with Thomas listening from the window. His father said nothing for a long while. Finally, Thomas smiled, small, proud, and tired. "Go," he whispered. "Play it for the world." But Keanu hesitated, not because he was afraid, but because part of him still held the anger, not just for what they did to his father, but what they tried to do to him. The world, for all its praise now, had once spat at his name, and it still could. He sat under the old tree in the library garden that evening, alone. As twilight bled into stars, a small voice interrupted him. Mr. Reeves, a boy maybe 10 years old, stood by the path. He wore no uniform, just a visitor's badge and old shoes. "My brother," the boy said. "He goes here. He told me what you did, how you didn't fight back, but still won." Keanu looked at the boy, surprised. "My mom says music is what healed her when Dad left," the boy continued. "So I think your song probably healed more than just your dad." He smiled. Awkward. Pure. "I hope you play again. Because not everyone listens to speeches, but everyone listens to a song." Then the boy left. Just like that. And Keanu understood. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about offering the world something better than what it gave him. 3 weeks later, Florence was alive with sound. Artists from every continent gathered in the ancient open-air theater, lined with stone columns and ivy-covered balconies. The final night belonged to the headliner, the one whose melody, they said, could silence a city. Keanu walked on stage, not in a tuxedo, not in designer shoes, just in his old jeans, his favorite shirt, and the guitar he had carried through every storm. His father watched from the second row, eyes brimming but steady. Elena sat beside him, her fingers curled around a sketchpad filled with drawings of every quiet moment between them. Keanu didn't say a word. He just played. But this time it was different. He played the same melody, the one he called "The Truth in Silence." But he added something more. He wove in a new section, lighter, hopeful, a sequence of chords that lifted, soared, and breathed like dawn after a long, bitter night. He didn't play to expose anymore. He played to forgive. The crowd stood in awe, not just for the music, but for the boy who refused to answer cruelty with bitterness. When the final note faded, there was no applause at first, just stillness, as if the world itself needed a moment to absorb it. And then the ovation began. Not thunderous, not frantic, but steady, heartfelt, rising like a tide of light. Keanu stood, bowed once, and left the stage quietly. In the weeks that followed, the song spread across continents. Orchestras played it, street musicians tried to recreate it. Millions listened. And no one could describe exactly why it moved them, only that it did. Whitehurst Academy was rebuilt, not with new walls but new purpose. It offered real scholarships now. It taught music not for praise, but for healing. And above the stage in the new performance hall, engraved in silver, were 6 words. He turned silence into a symphony. Keanu never chased fame. He never sold the rights to the song. He kept playing, yes, but always quietly, always on his terms, because sometimes the loudest legacy is the one that refuses to shout.